I wanted to highlight a little bit of evidence that I gathered back in 2022, I think it was. Um, I was able to access an online training module that was was endorsed by AusPATH, and it was the front face of the online training module in the videos is Dr. Michelle Telfer, who was head of the Royal Children's Hospital, Melbourne Children's Gender Clinic. And she was, I think at the time, the president of AusPATH. Now, she describes a process where, and she's very careful to describe a process where they don't medicalize the younger children. And by younger children, she means the 4-year-olds. But she says once they get to about the 8 to 10 mark, they have to start talking to them about medicine, about puberty blockade, and about fertility preservation. I've captured evidence in here. I've captured video, and there's actually even a flow chart here where it talks about what to do if the child's under 8 years of age, and then over 8 years of age, it goes down a pathway where they have what's called a SNAC appointment. Now, SNAC was an innovation in the Royal Children's Hospital Gender Clinic, and it stands for it's the single nurse clinician appointment. So a single nurse is able to assess them. So that's the first screening process they go through, is just a nurse practitioner who is a highly educated person, but is still a nurse, not the most senior type of medical colleague. Then they go for a mental health appointment, up to 3 sessions. This is an 8-year-old considering sterilization.
And this is a medical pathway. I think it's been highlighted, WPATH, that's filled with indoctrination as well.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
So you're 8, this is the path you're on. You like boys' toys, you like girls' toys, off you go. Single nurse says, yes, I think you meet the criteria. You're wearing the opposite sex clothing. Then you go
and
to
you can be the opposite sex, which is what they're saying.
And you
can be the opposite sex in every way that's real.
And if you jump through the hoops, you will gain access to the treatment that will make you the opposite sex. And then there's this pathway, and then they sort of decide whether or not they'll do the fertility preservation or not. And that's an optional. They might not even do it. And if they do the fertility preservation in boys, there's no description of the process for females, but in boys, it is a testicular biopsy. So that means getting a big needle and inserting it into the testicle of an 8 to 10-year-old boy to extract sperm, which I can only imagine it's because he's not mature enough to produce sperm in the normal way.
Well, they can't masturbate. The description of what happens, as well is...
Like, this is grim. It's so grim that they do this to children.
Because these kids have never masturbated, and then they remove their penis and put a cavity in there where they have to insert this dilator regularly. It's very painful. So they've never masturbated. They don't know what sexual pleasure is. And then they want part of the protocol is to test whether they have sexual pleasure.
And then it's also hard to have that conversation with someone that maybe hasn't went through puberty or ever engaged in sexual activity. When it comes time to actually do surgery, if an individual does go through suppression and ultimately is in their latter teenage years and wants a vaginoplasty, not only are you facing the struggle of not having a lot of tissue to work with, but that tissue hasn't been under the influence of testosterone, which definitely affects some things. And then a lot of patients, just from psychosocial issues and the dysphoria that they're experiencing, or just blatant transphobia in society, may have not had the opportunity to have a sexual partner. And more often than not, there's been almost no genital engagement in terms of self-stimulation or masturbation. So then trying to assess things like erogenous outcomes after a surgery when someone's never had an erogenous experience in their life is incredibly difficult because they don't really have a baseline to compare it to. Post-operative care is really intense, and we're kind of asking someone that is younger and hasn't really engaged or done much with their genitalia to all of a sudden do this like really aggressive relaxation for dilation. And I think there's going to be a huge role for therapy peri-operatively in terms of even preoperative genital engagement, trying to have those conversations, preparedness, readiness, support through that postoperative protocol, because some of the early challenges are getting someone to successfully dilate that's never had to engage with their pelvic floor musculature and is maybe 17, 18 years old. It's hard.
That cavity is the idea is to have it big enough for a full-size man's penis, because that's what a woman is. A woman is a person who has a cavity that a penis can go into. That's what their definition of a woman is. This medicine is so archaic and inhumane and removed from any form of human dignity.
This is pre-Freudian, like it's pre-Freudian understanding of human sexuality.
And the diagnostic criteria that they're using screens in feminine boys and masculine girls. So it screens in kids who already have pre-indicators for homosexuality. It's inherently homophobic and inherently misogynistic. They are so steeped in denial about what's happening because they're invested, they're financially invested, they're politically invested, because it's got all these cultural control mechanisms attached to it. Once they start to say, actually, none of this is true, these children are not going to be harmed by society if we just leave them alone. They're left without the control mechanisms because they've lost the minority stress argument.
Yeah. And it's also about a point of difference. Like say, I think when it comes to something like the Greens Party, it's about point of difference. It's about appearing socially progressive, and it's about that forced teaming.
Faster, young